So, I want to talk about my top 10 gaming experiences this year. Now, the first three ones are going to be my game of the year contenders for this year. In particular, these are games that came out this year. And then the next seven after that are going to be other experiences that may not have necessarily come out this year. So, just get into it. Number one is going to be Spider-Man 2. So, that's my game of the year. Spider-Man 2, I think, is a game that has me excited for the future of first-party games coming from PlayStation because it is the first sequel that has truly broken away from the PlayStation 4. And so we see some of the tremendous advantages that can happen when you divorce yourself from the previous generation console and when you fully commit to this new one. Spider-Man 2 is an amazing game in and of itself, but the promise that it holds for other first-party titles is truly what excites me about the future and the future prospects that we're going to see. As a game, I think it is a legendary sequel. I think it does being a sequel better than God of War Ragnarok and Horizon Forbidden West did, because those things were still on the PlayStation 4. So you were having PlayStation 4 games that were souped up to be running on the PlayStation 5 with certain advantages, but they were not built from the ground up to be PlayStation 5 only titles. When you play Spider-Man 2, there is no doubt in your mind that what is possible there could not have been done on the previous generation console. And that is what I really, really like about it. Horizon Forbidden West gets a special shout out, which I will mention later on. But with the Burning Shores DLC, they were also able to say like, hey, this content, this is PlayStation 5 only. So they give you some of those benefits, but it was still within the framework of the larger game. You know, you had the same weapons, you had the same enemy design, you kind of had the same speed to the enemies as well. So it's like, yes, it gave you a little bit of a taste, but it wasn't as big, you know, a morsel, as big a bite, as big a piece of steak as Spider-Man 2 is. So absolutely wonderful. Okay, second game of the year this year is going to be Sea of Stars. Now listen, I love Sea of Stars. I think Sea of Stars is one of the best gaming experiences ever. It does retro yet modern in a way that is just incredibly refreshing to me. And I know that there are other games that have had a similar kind of gameplay design and everything, but I just absolutely love my time with Sea of Stars. And the only thing I have to complain about is the platinum. It has what I believe is a pretty terrible platinum run, in that it took me about 30-ish hours maybe to finish Sea of Stars, if I remember correctly. And yet it took me another 20 hours on top of that to get the platinum. And I have a thing. I know that there's a lot of talk about like difficulty versus that when it comes to having a platinum in any game. I don't want to get into the full conversation about that, but here's what I believe. Everything in your game to get a platinum should be done within one run. I shouldn't have to force myself to repeat a game or to go into New Game Plus just to get the platinum. Like, just let me play the game once, like reward me for my time. I don't think any game really deserves to make you play it 2, 3, 4 times sometimes just to get the platinum. Like, no game is good enough for that. Like, for that to be a requirement, for that to be a demand from the developer, no gaming experience is good enough for that. Sometimes you only have time to play the game once. Let me play it, let me beat it, let me complete it. Sometimes a platinum might require 100% of the game to be done, everything that you could possibly do, which Sea of Stars does require, and it requires a New Game Plus on top of that. It's crazy. So in any case, like I said, I just believe that everything should have been done within one playthrough. And technically you could do it in Sea of Stars, but you would have had to look up the trophies ahead of time and then plan accordingly. And I just think that once you are playing for the trophies rather than playing to enjoy the game, it just takes away a little bit of the magic for me. So yeah, that was a bit disappointing. Okay, next game of the year is going to be Hogwarts Legacy, coming in at number 3. I think Hogwarts Legacy, first of all, it comes in at number 3 because I haven't beat it yet, but I just think that it was a legendary surprise. I think it's a game that could have and probably should have failed because, you know, whenever we think about all these licensed games and everything. When we think about the fact that the studio wasn't that renowned, you just look at it and there's many red flags there. You just think to yourself, is that going to work out? But it did. And I say this as a non-Harry Potter fan, it is just a great game. And that's what I love the most about it. You don't have to be a fan of Harry Potter to enjoy this game, and that is just awesome. It's a great game in and of itself. It presents amazing systems, the sense of place, the wizarding world. It makes you actually want to engage with the Harry Potter content, whether those are the books or the movies, even more. And I just think that it is incredibly successful. So I'm really happy that I got to play that. Okay, so from this point on, I'm going to talk about some game experiences that did not necessarily come out this year, or that are experiences rather than full games. So the first one is going to be Horizon Forbidden West Burning Shores. I loved Burning Shores. I think Burning Shores did for me what a critical failure of Horizon Forbidden West was, in that in Horizon Forbidden West, you have all of these companions that are supposed to be on this journey with you, but you don't actually go on a lot of missions with them. I think you only do one or two big story moments alongside them, and even then your interactions with them are quite limited. So what happens then is that you do not build that rapport that I felt like somehow the first game actually built up more of a rapport with those characters that you were with than the second game did, even though the second game should have had plenty of opportunity to literally go on missions with them. One of the things that Horizon Forbidden West and Zero Dawn have always kind of put forward is that Aloy is this solitary kind of hunter. She's a person that can go and get it all done by herself. But I think there's actually a lot to be gained when you actually put her, within the company of others, and then show her that as intelligent as she is, as smart as she is, as clever as she is, as witty as she is, she still needs help. The first game somehow did this better, even though this time she has like official companions. And in Burning Shores, they rectify that. In Burning Shores, the companion that you get is actually there for a lot of the missions. And I think it's important to see the hero from the perspective of somebody else, even if you're not taking over complete control of the other character. It would have been amazing if they got us to play certain sections as other companions so that you could feel the difference between what Aloy can do and what these guys can do. But that's besides the point. Horizon Forbidden West, the Burning Shores DLC, is an amazing experience, and I'm really glad I got to have it. Okay, Death Stranding Director's Cut is my number 2 gaming experience. That is kind of a tangential one, or number 5 if you keep in count. Death Stranding Director's Cut. Death Stranding came out years ago. I only played it this year. It's an amazing game. There are many things about the game that I think could be improved. The sense of place when it comes to the cities. Like the cities in Death Stranding are basically just giant Amazon warehouses. But even within that restraint, they don't feel alive. You're always talking to holograms of robots or interacting with people in these inorganic ways. There's a little bit of a reason behind that. There's a little bit of story world building that kind of makes it make sense. But really the human element would have made it a lot of a better game. I don't mind it. It was the first game. I would like to see some improvements in the sequel. But when we're talking about the strong positives of the game, we are talking about the chiral network. The way that they do asynchronous co-op multiplayer in the game is so intelligent, so creative, so fitting for what the game is trying to put forward. The story, amazing. It's just the characters that you do meet and the ones you do interact with, despite their names. You have the person called Hartman, and many other names where you're like, okay, did they really call him that? Or you're called Sam Porter Bridges because you carry things as a porter and you bridge America by creating links between people. Like, it's extremely on the nose, And this is my first Kojima game, by the way, so I'm not used to like, are you really just called the person the thing that they are? But hey, that's what he does apparently. Death Stranding is an amazing experience. It is not for everybody. If you click with it, you're going to love it. If after 6 hours you still don't click with it, I think that's it. I think within the 6 hours, it really truly shows you all of the gameplay that it has to offer. Then it's just about unraveling the mysteries of the world and interacting with these characters. But within the first 6 hours, you've gotten the gameplay. Like, you've experienced enough and you've gotten everything down that you should be able to make a decision for yourself whether or not you keep going. That's what it is. Okay, number 7 is going to be Nier Automata, with a special shout out to Nier Replicant. I think Nier Automata has the best gameplay, period, ever created in the game. I also believe that it has one of the best stories, period, ever written down for a video game. Set in the most dead world ever encountered in a game. The world of Nier Automata is so crushingly dead that it completely ruins the experience for me. I hate every single part of this world, and yet I love the gameplay that I get to experience in this world. I love the story in this world. I think Nier Automata was the first game that made me realize how much the game world is important. And I've heard some people praise this game world. I've heard some people talk about its simplicity, the fact that it's so confined, its density, the way that it interacts with you. All of those are lies. It's a bad game world. It's a bad game world. Yet it encompasses one of the greatest games ever created. I just think if the world was a little bit more alive, a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more pleasing to look at, Nier Automata would have been the system seller that it should have been, because it's a dead world. And that amazing gameplay, those amazing stories, those amazing characters, they have to live within this world. It's impossible to. It would be like going somewhere where you know you're going to be served the best food, but it's literally just, I don't know, infested with rodents. Like the place itself keeps you away from the greatness of the content that you know that you can enjoy there. And that's a damn shame. I would like a Nier Automata remade from the ground up in a better engine by more talented developers, because now you have the story, now you have the gameplay. Just go ahead and make this world feel a lot more alive than it does. And it's incredibly hard to tell you why it feels so dead and soulless until you play it, because when you look at YouTube video, it will just look like, oh yeah, this is like a PlayStation 2 type of world. That's not too bad. But no, I've played like even Sea of Stars. Sea of Stars, that is a 8-bit or is it 16-bit? Sea of Stars is like one of those pixel-based, sprites kind of thing, and it has a far more alive world, far more alive than Nier Automata ever did. I truly love Nier Automata, but I hate the world that it's in. Nier Replicant is the same. I think it has an even tighter story, even though the gameplay is not as good as Nier Automata, but it is right up there. They are side by side, they are siblings, they are twins of one another. And yet the world is equally dead. I will say though that Nier Replicant's world is still a lot less dead than Nier Automata, if that makes sense. So that's my story on Nier. I think it's an amazing game. If you think the game world is amazing, you're going to think that this is a 10 out of 10. If you think that the game world is as much of a letdown as I do, you're going to find yourself struggling to score it above a 7. But still, one of my favorite gaming experiences, because the gameplay and the story, just that good. Okay, Gran Turismo 7. Now, obviously Gran Turismo came out last year. I played it last year, but I found myself coming back to this game because I just use it to chill. It's amazing. I'm not a racer, and I got into Gran Turismo 7 because of nostalgia for Gran Turismo 3. There's a bit of a story there, but I won't bore you with it. The point is, Gran Turismo 7, I got into it for 2 reasons. Number 1, the nostalgia. And then number 2, because it does something for me that I just thought was so necessary. That is, it tries to get you to love cars. Like, just love cars themselves. The history of cars, the manufacturers of cars, the designers of cars, the philosophies behind cars, the way that cars and humans have interacted. It tries to get you to love in more than just like the body style or the performance of the car or the on-track, racing of the car. It tries to get you to really love everything surrounding car culture. It tries to package that into a neat one-stop shop, whether you like taking photography of cars in scapes, and it gives you so many options, real options to photograph cars, whether you like the history behind cars and you like to visit the museums that are in the game, whether you only care about multiplayer and racing. It tries to just put everything in one place so that if you're like, wow, I really like a Porsche 911, you can go and find out almost everything there is to find out about a Porsche 911 right there in the game. You can get to ogle at the cars, different version of that car, the history behind that car, the love of that car is just, that's really what makes me so excited to play it. Because whenever I complete a menu, it gives you that little synopsis of where these cars came from. And that just does it for me. That was literally one of the biggest reasons I pulled the trigger. And the more and more cars they keep adding, because I think Gran Turismo 7 is a live service game done right. And so the more they keep adding, the more there is to discover. And it's not just about how fast does it go around the bend. And I love it for that. Okay. Last three. Number 8 is going to be Disco Elysium. Now, Disco Elysium came out, I don't even know, 2017, maybe 2018. And I played it on PC for a little bit. But at the time, my PC was a potato. You know, it was the Series S of PCs. And it was just not really attainable. And I just don't like gaming on PC. Even now that I have a more powerful one, I just don't really like the experience. You see, this room is pretty bland. I have a much better setup in the living room. So I prefer playing on PlayStation. So I was always waiting. I was like, this is a game I want to play. I want to experience it. I wanted to come to PlayStation, and then eventually it did, and then eventually I bought it, and then eventually I played it. And Disco Elysium is every bit this game that all of those awards were winning for. I think it's an amazing game. You're playing as a detective where you have thoughts, and those thoughts can speak to you, and it is just, there's a murder mystery. It's amazing. The characters, you know, of Reva Shaw and all of these meta narratives and political commentary, it's just a wonderful adventure. I love Disco Elysium. It is hard to tell you what makes it amazing without going on a 15-minute, you know, kind of a tangent about it. But go ahead, look at reviews, and I think you'll love it too. It is available now on PlayStation Plus, I believe. So you have no reason to not give it a go. And it's the Final Cut now. So now pretty much every interaction is voice acted, which is nice in case you don't like to read all the time. All right. Number 9 is going to be Forspoken. Okay, gotta give it a special shout out. Forspoken to me is a bit like Nier Automata in a way, in that this is the world that is dead, and that is actually the world that is constraining it. Except that Forspoken has far more limitations. There is no way as good a game as Nier Automata, but it does suffer from the fact that the combat, while being amazing, is set against a backdrop of an extremely dull world. So the world of Forspoken has basically 4 sections, and all of them are just kind of the same with different color filters. Like there's a green section, there's a blue section, there's a red section. There are some differences in topology, but it feels the same. Like you can tell that parts of it are different. There's parts with floating islands, but the way you interact with the world, the way that you run across the world, the way that you do things in the world, it feels the same no matter where you are. And the biggest, you know, kind of difference is, oh, this area has a green filter on top. Oh, this area is bluer than the other one. Oh, this area is red now. The monsters and the enemies design, completely trash. Some enemies are good, but there's like 1 or 2 of them. There are dungeons that you can go to, and I think there's like 52 dungeons or something, and they're all just the same copy paste system. Like it feels a bit like the Dragon Age 2, you know, caves, where you just like, oh, this time you go to the left or you go to the right, but really it's the exact same map. And then they try to build some lore within that world, but it was just extremely constrained. I feel like it took them so long to get the combat right, which they did, which is why this is on, you know, this list. They did get the combat right. I think they actually made it way too complex. I think they have far too many spells, because the reason that I say that is that it is clunky to switch between everything. You know, not only is it clunky to switch between everything, but you keep on top of what your strategy is, what your timers are, because one thing is that if you use one particular type of magic, and you activate a spell, you might think that, oh, that is like a shared timer for every single thing that I can do in the game. And it's like, no, it isn't. It is a particular timer for that particular spell that you use. But each school of magic, quote unquote, could have like 8 different spells. So let's say you use 3 spells from one particular school, but then they gel well with an effect of a spell from another school of magic. Sounds great, right? And then let's say you use 3 over there, and then you activate the third school of magic and you use 2 over there. Well, now you have 8 different timers that you're supposed to keep track of, and the game does not make it easy for you to realize when something is off your cooldown. It is incredibly hard. It's so convoluted. Actually controlling the combat flow and pace of combat. And one of the ways that they try, and this is kind of an admission of defeat that they didn't do a good enough job, especially with the enemy design, is that there is an auto evade option. It's just there in the menu. You don't have to activate an advanced settings. It's just right there. And the reason it's there is that, number one, you spend so much of your brain power in Forspoken trying to keep track of what your strategy is, which spells you've activated, which one should have been off cooldown by now. It's like the more the game rewards you with spells and magic and things that you can do, and there are awesome things that you can do, but the harder it makes it on you mechanically to keep track of it all. I feel like it will actually be more successful on PC, where you could just have a bar at the bottom, and that bar could just show you all of your spells and all of the icons, and then you could figure out at a glance exactly what you have available to you. It would actually be better on PC with a very typical MMO layout. But on console, man, it's like the more the game rewards you, the harder it gets to actually work well with the game. Like the dance and the synergies that you want to create, they're harder to keep track of. It will be like, those directors at the symphony opera or something. It's like the more instruments and the more people they have to manage, yes, the more beautiful sounds and the more complex melodies they can make, but the harder it is to keep track of what each individual person is doing. And that's kind of how it feels like in Forspoken, but not in a good way. Not in a way that makes you feel like, I'm so intelligent. Mostly in a way that feels like, wow, this is incredibly convoluted. And so, yeah, I think in the sequel, they should, number one, reduce how many spells you get, or combine effects, or allow me, I guess, to have spells grouped into a single kind of icon, and then just let me fire all of those at the same time, so that if I have, a spell that makes the water, appear, water bubble, and then a lightning spell that works off of that, because now these enemies are wet and there's more conductive to lightning. Let me combine those two into a single icon or a single thing, so that it has a single cooldown, and then I can kind of make synergies that way, I guess. And then finally, create better enemy design, because one of the reasons that they have this auto evade option is that it is almost impossible to tell when enemies are going to attack you, because there are so many of them that spawn at once, and they all attack at random moments, which is more realistic. But on top of you just having this mental orchestra, imagine if that guy was trying to direct this orchestra, but at the same time juggling 16 different balls in the air. That's what it feels like when the combat is at its most intense, and you don't have that auto evade aid turned on. Also, because the game is so, I guess, overflowing with potential options, it is so easy to create overpowered builds immediately, builds that will just literally papier mache anything, including the bosses. So they just got to make it simpler. And while they save time on having a much more streamlined system in Forspoken 2, they should create a much more appealing world with diversity and biomes and areas that feel unique, and a better tie-in to the world and its characters, because the story of Forspoken, while not the best, is just above average, and yet it has the potential to be so much more than that. I think actually Forspoken should get a reboot. I think you should just start again from the ground up. Same character. I love the main character. They talked about the dialogue. One of the biggest things that people complain about is the dialogue in the game. That is completely false, okay? There are some cringe moments in this game, but there's maybe 10 in an entire game that are truly cringe. But the dialogue between the Cuff and, what was her name? Oh, God. Frey. I think it's Frey, right? The dialogue between the Cuff and her is actually perfectly fine. Yes, they did some bad supercuts in the trailers, but in the actual game, it's not an issue. Wow, that's a lot of time on Forspoken. I love Forspoken, but it is just a deeply flawed game. It's a bit like a child that you love, but at the same time, they're a bit of a delinquent. Like, you love them, but you're like, hey, listen, you've got a lot of ways to go. So that's it. Okay, number 10, finally, Hades. Thankfully, I don't have to fix Hades because Hades is an amazing game through and through. And I played Hades for so many hours on PC first. I beat it on PC, I went all the way on PC, and I loved it so much that I knew that as soon as the PlayStation 5 version came, I would buy it, and then eventually I will play it again from the start because it doesn't carry, you know, your saves, even though I would have really loved that. From the start again on the PlayStation 5. And I did that and I loved it and I don't regret any minute of it. So that's it. Those are my top 10 gaming experiences of 2023. And as a bonus, I will tell you what I believe will be the game of the year or should be the game of the year nominees this year. Okay, so number 1, Alan Wake 2. Oh, these are in alphabetical order, so don't worry about it. Yeah, the game of the year nominees according to me: Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Hogwarts Legacy, Sea of Stars, Spider-Man 2, and Tears of the Kingdom. Okay, so out of those, I believe that Baldur's Gate 3 is the main runner-up to win. Yeah, I believe that's the one that's going to win. Followed closely by Spider-Man 2 and Hogwarts Legacy, I guess. But I think Baldur's Gate 3 is far and away the main contender. It's a bit like Elden Ring was last year. Like, yes, God of War Ragnarok was a true contender. They're all true contenders, right? They're all amazing games. But it's like Elden Ring is the one that truly was the one up there. You know, it was the favorite of the bunch, and then it just cleaned up house as it should have. So I believe that this year it's Baldur's Gate 3's turn to actually go ahead and clean up the house. My personal game of the year is Spider-Man 2, but I haven't played Baldur's Gate 3 yet, so I couldn't compare the two. All right, so that's it for now, and I hope that you guys have a wonderful day doing whatever it is that you do.